you all. I'm Sergeant Jacobs. For those of you who I've never met before, welcome and nice to meet you. I haven't seen everybody's face. I don't know you, Sarge. What's your name?
I'm Sergeant Hughes, Sergeant.
Sergeant what?
Sergeant Hughes. I'm in the Olympia Center.
Oh, okay, Olympia. All right, nice to meet you, Sergeant Hughes. Everybody else look familiar. So today we're going to talk about the MAVNI program. Obviously, there's been some changes, and I want to make sure everyone is brought up to speed on the changes. Some of you are more proficient than others, so I'm going to be, asking for a little bit of involvement from everyone just to talk back and forth. And
Just Sergeant Kevin.
just Sergeant Kevin? He's the resident SME. All right. So I just want to throw it out there. For those of you who are not necessarily very proficient or do MAVNI a lot, write MAVNI contracts a lot, just what do you think MAVNI is all about? Who wants to just start off by just telling me? Not Sergeant Kevin. What's MAVNI? What does MAVNI mean to you? What do you know about MAVNI? Anybody? Center leader. Sergeant Trumpeter.
They have a special skill. It's a language skill.
Okay.
So, we have operations going on all over the world. So they have that language skill that we can, it's a trade-off. Hey, you come join the Army and, we're going to use you and your skill, and then in return we're going to make you a U.S. citizen. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
And they know that. They
Right.
understand that.
Yeah, good one. Anybody else? I'm not talking to Sergeant Joe, I'm talking to you.
Sorry, me? Oh,
Yeah.
I got it.
You can serve me.
I'd like to piggyback off what he just said. It sounds great. It's pretty much a win-win for everybody. They have a skill, they have something that we can use to help to bridge the gap between their country and ours. Is what I think the ultimate goal of it is. And it's been working so far.
Okay, well, just to put some perspective on the MAVNI program, it's not a USARED program. Oh, sorry, Pete, sorry, go ahead.
Like Sergeant Fields was just saying. Oftentimes, people look at the MAVNI program as if they have a problem with it. But in fact, most of all the MAVNIs that we put in are 50s. They're 50.
Right.
And these people speak another language. And English.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually speak more languages than most people in this room. They speak 2 languages. I speak 2 languages. One of them is English, and one of them is Army. But
Thank you so much for
so,
signing.
speaking those 2 languages is huge.
Okay.
It's huge.
All right, good point, good point. So just continuing on, I just wanted you all to know that, the MAVNI program is not a USARED program. It's actually a Department of the Army program. And some of you might be aware that there was a time when it was on and off. You could only put in certain languages. Now it's completely wide open. There's no longer any caps on MAVNI. I had a recruiter recently ask me about a cap. And the cap's been removed a long time ago. So make sure you're articulating this to your center. Your centers, there is no longer a cap on any language for the reserve or the regular Army. Okay? Except Spanish. Well, no. Spanish, unfortunately, some Major Castellano would love for Spanish to be part of the MAVNI program, but no. All right, so listen, but yeah, there's no longer any caps on the program. You have to make sure that obviously they're fully qualified. We talk about that in a little bit here. But just so you know, the Secretary of Defense authorized the military service to recruit certain legal aliens whose skills are considered to be vital to national interests. Those holding critical skills like physicians, nurses, and certain experts in language associated with certain cultural backgrounds would be eligible. And to determine its value in enhancing military readiness, they've actually made it completely wide open. Next slide, please. All right, so here's a little background on MAVNI. Sergeant Kavik, can you read the slide for me?
Non-citizens have served in the military since the Revolutionary War. The Lodge Act of 1950 permitted non-citizen Eastern Europeans to enlist between 1950 and 1959. Additionally, the United States officially began recruiting Filipino nationals into the Navy in the late 1940s when it signed the Military Bases Agreement of 1947, allowing U.S. military bases in the Philippines. In total, over 35,000 Filipinos enlisted in the Navy through the program between 1952 and 1991. Today, about 24,000 non-citizens serve on active duty, and about 5,000 legal permanent resident aliens, green card holders, enlist on active duty each year. law ensures that the sacrifice of non-citizens during a time of national need is met with an opportunity for early citizenship to recognize their contribution and sacrifice. In fact, today's
Almost there.
In fact, today's service members are eligible for expedited citizenship under a July 2002 executive order, and the military services have worked closely with the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, to streamline citizenship processing for service members. Since September 11, 2001, over 78,000 as of April 2012, members of the armed forces have obtained their citizenship while serving this nation.
Thank you so much. And those numbers are a lot higher, obviously, since then. And just so you all know, MAVNI is not new, as you can tell from the background. It's not a new program. The pilot program that most of us are familiar with, they opened that up in 2009 in New York City and LA. So that was the pilot program that most of us might be familiar with if you were in recruiting back then. But back then it was specialized to certain areas because they had more predominance of certain ethnic backgrounds in large cities pretty much. So right now there's no longer any restrictions on where you can find a MAVNI or who puts in MAVNI. Everyone puts them in. Next slide, please. All right, so we're not going to hit all these slides. In the beginning, there was a streamlined process to get the MAVNI info to the recruiters, but now it's pretty much you're being contacted directly. No one's going to Go Army. Some still do. Are you all getting, requests through Go Army site? Seldomly. So before, that's kind of how they wanted it, but now everyone's coming directly to you with a call or walking in or a referral, pretty much, right? For those who are working it. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the process. So there's been some changes in the process for MAVNI. Most recent changes in the beginning, initially when you all submitted your request came up to us. We did a QC on the packets. We forwarded it to G3, who then did another QC on the packet. Then they forwarded those packets up through USCIS through the SAVE database. Currently, I guess, with 2 people at USAREC working all of those for all of the Army, they said, you know what, it's not effective, it's taking too long. Let's bring it down to the battalion level and have SMEs at the battalion level do these GA45s. So now the process is, when you or your SME in your center forward up a GA45 request to us, it's being processed right there now by us directly into the SAVE database, and we are uploading your document and verifying it ourselves. So we've essentially cut out the G3 and higher steps. And what that means for you is you're going to get a quicker turnaround on your GA45s, as long as there's no issues with it. We just formally got trained on the process last week, myself and Craig, who's the alternate if I'm not around. That's Craig Trahan, if you're not familiar. And so far, from what we've seen in doing them, it's about, depending on the applicant and his status, it's about 24 to 36, not even 72 hours. It's coming back a lot quicker. So that should help a lot. There's no, as far as when you send it to me, if I'm not around, I'll make sure everyone knows, but it's myself as the primary and Craig as the alternate. But if you're working certain packets with Craig, like I know Sergeant Trumpeter had a few that he was working with Craig, we don't want you to duplicate. I guess don't send them both to Craig and myself, because then we'll both be working the same stuff and take up more time. So continue to send them to me as a primary, and if I'm not around, Craig will be back up. So regarding the process, like I said, it's about 3 days. And as you all know, it's these are some of the options that MAVNIs have, especially for the reserve: citizenship, legal non-immigrant alien, asylum, or DACA. Everyone knows what DACA is, right? Anyone does not know what DACA is? And I'm here to explain, so.
So
Sure.
reading this, if they are DACA status, they are eligible for MAVNI?
Yes.
That's a true statement?
Yes. And the great thing about DACA applicants are they have no waiting period. So a regular MAVNI has to have been in status for at least 2 years. DACA, as soon as they're approved, there's no requirement for them to wait to enlist.
But they have to fall under the language requirements. Right?
Yes, they still have to meet the language requirement.
Because you get somebody down in, I was down in Phoenix, you get a lot of Spanish speakers
No.
that would be DACA.
Right, but they can't join. They still have to meet the language requirement. Yes?
I'll be the dumb guy. What's DACA?
So DACA is their deferred action. So are y'all familiar with the act that President Bush signed in, I think I want to say about a year ago, it went hot. These are people that came here in a certain status. It's called deferred action. Maybe as a child of someone, an immigrant, they were born here but never quite had status or whatever. But the deferred action status allows them to pretty much have expedited status rights right away. They don't have waiting periods. Once their stuff has been reviewed through USCIS, they are approved, they are good to go. So they're called deferred action. I don't remember the C and the other A, but childhood arrival. That's the other part. So they had to have come here as a child of a alien or as a immigrant. Deferred action for childhood arrivals. All right. Waivers, as you all know, no conduct waiver is authorized for MAVNI. Yes, they can get medical waivers. A lot of the Asians have to get eye waivers. I'm sure y'all are tracking that. Screening process. So I know the Colonel touched on it earlier regarding safety, right? And the concern about, you know, the new rise of ISIS and everything. And a lot of you might be concerned about putting in all these MAVNIs, right? So as recruiters, obviously it's not for you to determine, you know, qualifications on that level. You're doing moral checks if they say they have law violations. You're running fingerprints. That's about it when it comes to your checks. Now, what Big Army does is they do the NEC and the SSBI background checks on all MAVNI applicants. Once they enlist at the MEPS, that process is automatically initiated the very next day. So a MAVNI applicant will have a serious background check done on them. And just recently we had someone who was not enlisted through our battalion, but he was on a no-fly list, which was caught before he shipped. And that could be for any reason. You know, he could have just been associating with someone, or family members in his past from his country have been linked to whatever. There's different reasons for that happening. But in that case, the system worked and it verified that he was on a no-fly list. And those are things that happen. But within our realm, it's not up to us to disqualify an applicant based on your feelings or perception of whether you think they might be linked to an extremist organization. In doing your pre-qual, you're obviously asking certain questions to determine qualifications and moral qualifications especially. But with regard to a deeper check with terrorism and stuff, that will be identified through the deeper background check that MAVNIs are associated
So that's
with.
why the waiting period.
Yes, hence the waiting period. Waiting period, who knows what the waiting period is for MAVNI?
20 days.
180.
Used to be 120, 180 days, except for DACA. DACA is 270 days. That's to leave. That's to leave for training. So 270 for DACA, 180 for MAVNIs. So that time frame gives the background check an opportunity to go do a full thorough check and verify all their records and verify that they are legit for the Army.
Yes, I have a question about the 6-month waiting period. form.
Yes.
One of my guys just got increased. I guess they didn't finish with his background
Yeah.
screening. I don't know much else about it, but all I saw was the rock scan in the arm, a new reservation
Yes.
person, and that was 18 days before the guy was supposed to ship.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way we can combat that as far as knowing sooner or knowing ahead of time, or what the issue is?
Usually your applicants will start telling you, you know, a lot of them will come to you and they'll say, hey, I haven't been contacted yet by the investigator. Hey, what, you know, because they always get nervous because they're waiting on this investigation to happen, right? So if you're hearing from them and it's about a month from shipping and they still haven't been contacted by an interviewer, then you need to raise a red flag and we can find out through G3 what's going on.
Okay, 'cause
But
he's
normally
already been
that
talked
doesn't
to.
happen a lot.
He's already been talked to and everything, and the guy sold his car and told his family to quit sending him money.
Yeah.
And
I understand. Sometimes they fall into those uncomfortable positions, but as a MAVNI, they cannot ship until that background check is good. And that's why, as the center leaders, you all have to make sure they understand that too. You know, joining is one thing, but they're actually not in until that background check is complete. They are in the Army, but let's say something unfavorable comes back. So a lot of them, this is the other thing, a lot of them will say, can I stop my enrollment at school because I'm paying out of pocket? I wouldn't recommend advising them to do so, even though they can choose to do so, because they pay out of pocket. These guys don't qualify for federal loans, so it's really hard. They're paying, you know, top money for school. But if something should happen, they get injured, or for some reason that background check comes back unfavorable, guess what? They're not shipping. You know, and sometimes what they'll do is they'll actually allow them to ship while it's pending, and then they'll complete the investigation while they're going through training. And even then, sometimes those come back unfavorable, and then they're at the Army. So I wouldn't advise them to sell their cars too quickly. Maybe try work on getting some power of attorneys or something like that in place so they can leave their stuff with someone who can handle their affairs. But I would recommend them giving themselves enough time to allow that background check, because that's the most important part of their process. They're not in until that comes back favorable. Any other questions? All right, next,
Quick comment, Sergeant Jacobs.
Yes,
I
sir.
know we're talking about the background checks, and it's not our position to actually have anything in terms of whether or not they're good to go or concerns about terrorism type thing. If you really think about the big picture of what MAVNI is all about, why maybe Congress decided to do this in the first place, it's a pretty awesome thing. You know, most of us here in this room are lucky enough to be at least second generation Americans here. And our fathers, our parents, our fathers and mothers, and those that, grandparents and those beyond, had the difficult time of trying to get from another country to make it over here to the United States, where they were able to provide better lives for themselves, for their families, their children, their children's children, until finally us, right? And not all of us are the case. You know, some of us are first generation here in the United States. But for the most part, in this room, we're lucky enough to have generational, you know, I guess, I don't know, generational time under our belts to be able to establish ourselves here firmly in America. Now, what MAVNI is doing here is providing that opportunity to better create the idea of what America first was, right? In the 1700s, when we were first established here, the concept of what we took pride in was the fact that this was supposed to be a melting pot. This was supposed to be an integration of all the different cultures to come in and have that reflection of diversity in the population that truly makes us strong, makes America what it is. And that's what MAVNI is doing here. MAVNI is doing it in such a way that it creates patriots. Patriots in the first generation of folks coming in who are deciding, hey, I will do this and I'll make this sacrifice and put myself out there to don the uniform for something of substance and to provide a better life for myself, to make the sacrifice for my country, and then for my children, my children's children to come. What do you think is going to happen with those people? They are probably the most patriotic individuals that we have in this country. They are true patriots because they're coming from thinking in terms of second world countries sometimes, or third world countries, to come to the United States. They truly cherish what they have here. Because what we have, sometimes it's real easy to lose sight of and say, you know, hey, I got my Xbox, I got my cable TV. These are things that are just unheard of in a lot of countries that exist out there. They're the true patriots here. The MAVNI program is providing that. It's awesome. And not only are we getting it for that generation, but we're getting it for at least the next generation to come, the folks that truly appreciate what they have here. So this is an awesome thing, and I truly tout it as being the opportunity of our day and age now to truly create a melting pot environment, and we have this at our disposal. So I love the MAVNI program, and I hope folks recognize it for what it is. So I just kind of want to toss that out, Sergeant Jacobs, because you're talking in terms of recognizing and evaluating people up front.
Right.
But the truth be told is this is an awesome program, and it's a cool thing that we're doing.
yes, sorry, Tony.
Since we're still on the process line, the ones that I had already sent up that had been up to G3 and further, do I need to resend those to you, or will those continue to process?
Yeah, so what happened was, once they figured out that we have created training and sent it down to the battalion, what they did was they sent back all the ones that they hadn't processed.
Okay.
So what I did was I waited a little time to see if there was still time frame for them to send them back, and if they haven't come back, then I was hitting people up directly saying, hey, send these back. So if it's been over 10 days, send them back, and I'll resubmit them. Some of you have already been doing that and getting them back already.
Thank you.
Okay. So to caveat on what the BC just said, being not too far removed from a center myself, right? What you all are seeing being passed around is just a little snippet. I wanted to add it to my slide deck, but I wasn't able to. So what you all were looking at is how Sergeant Jacobs got involved with MAVNI. And one of the things, if you're not really in it yet, or you're trying to get in it, that I want you to know is a lot of what happens is it starts with that one person, right? That one person that just needs a good recruiter to help them get in, and they're not really familiar with the process. Or, as some of you might already know, a lot of times these guys come into your office, they already know more than probably most of you do about the program because they are very informed. So in order for you to be able to help them, you have to be just as informed, if not more, to be able to provide assistance to them because they're coming into your office already very knowledgeable about the program. So what happened is someone reached out to me who was having a hard time. It happens a lot with these guys. Initially, there weren't a lot of people out there who were really good at the program. And from that person, helping that person through the process and being professional with that person, it opened up the door for a lot more referrals. And a lot of these guys have ended up being honor grads. You know, a lot of these guys have ended up being, you know, soldiers of the Army. You know, 2012 soldier of the Army was a MAVNI, you know, and they continue to do great things. So I just wanted to share that with you as to how I got involved. And I got involved out of a necessity to help people who were in need of help and couldn't connect with the right recruiter. Now, what the Colonel was talking about in terms of the awesomeness of the program is this. You know, a lot of people in the past were pushed away who had genuine, sincere interest in the Army because of person's personal feelings about the MAVNI program. And a lot of you in here might be having some of those feelings about the program. I've met recruiters who straight up told me, I don't like the program. I've heard comments like, hey, you know, let's put in Proud Americans, you know, let's find a Proud American, you know, MAVNI, whatever. I've heard them all. At the end of the day, these are going to be some of the most committed people you will ever work with. Okay, I don't want you all to start developing these xenophobic, and if you don't know what a xenophobe is, that's someone who has a fear of foreigners. There's people who have fear of foreigners, don't like talking to them, don't like working with them, and don't feel like MAVNIs belong. These are qualified people, as long as you take the time to get to know them, find out why they want to join the Army, just like you do with your Army story with regular applicants that are American born. Take the time to find out why and gender their commitment. Most times they're already coming in your door committed. And the process will go pretty seamless. The basic gist of what you all need to know is pretty much on the MAVNI website through G3, and also some of the information I push out to you guys, but it's really not that difficult. So what I'm saying is, I don't want you to turn away qualified people because of your personal feelings about the program. There are a lot of personal feelings out there about the program. Put that feeling aside, make sure your recruiters aren't projecting their personal feelings about the program when they're talking to these applicants, because one bad experience could lead to your whole center not putting in a MAVNI ever again. They all talk to each other, they all share their experiences, and that's how you all get referrals. You don't just become the MAVNI guy or the MAVNI king like Sarn Cavett, you know, overnight. It takes time, it takes developing relationships and trust. A big thing with MAVNI applicants, they are going to work with you because they trust you and they trust your competence in the program and your knowledge of the program. So just wanted to throw that out there. All right, next slide, if there's no questions. So let's talk about eligibility, and I'm going to go through these a little bit quicker. Most of you are familiar with the eligibility of MAVNIs. They must meet one of these non-immigrant categories. DACA, as you already know, does not fall under that 2-year minimum requirements. Next slide. Healthcare professionals. So I left this slide in here because I know we're not healthcare recruiters, but you can pre-qual a MAVNI who is interested in the healthcare program and then route them to the local AMED recruiter, because AMED does enlist MAVNIs as well. You all know that, right? Oh, yeah. So if there's a guy that comes in, don't try to make him go regular Army if he's obviously qualified more for AMED. You know, determine his qualification and forward his information onto the AMED recruiter. Y'all are not doing that, right? No. All right.
Yeah, but you get credit though.
It's what's best suited for the applicant, okay?
If you refer them to the AMED recruiter and they join, you get credit for that.
Absolutely, yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are some of the languages. These are not all the languages. They've added quite a few languages to this list.
Hey, Jane. Hey, give her your undivided attention.
All right, so like I said, these are some of the languages that are available to the MAVNI program. There's over 60 languages right now. Most of you are more familiar with Korean, Chinese, and now that's Chinese Mandarin and Chinese Cantonese. And most of you are also familiar with Swahili. You know, certain areas will have pockets of certain distribution of languages. And in Seattle, you'll see a lot more Koreans than you would someone that's Swahili background. With that being said, how do you all prospect for MAVNIs if you're prospecting? Can somebody just kind of toss it out there? Yes, Sarn Jones?
We do referrals.
Okay.
Referrals, we have a lot of senior alpha MAVNIs at the school that join. So referral based, that's how we're getting ours.
Do you find that that 2-year minimum wait requirement hurts because you kind of have to find them in the right window?
Yes, we've had a lot of J45s denied because
not in
can't
that 2 year.
verify.
Yeah. Ms. Sarn Cavett?
When we do our telephone calls, we go to the sophomore list.
Okay.
2 years.
2 years. Good idea.
Bill,
Are you all hearing Sarn Cavett? You said he goes to the sophomore list to find the 2-year qualified applicants.
Bellevue College, they have an international school that's right around the corner, so we went over there and talked to the instructors first to start kind of branching out.
Yeah, and then the referrals. A lot of you might also, if you're not members of the MAVNI Forum, join the MAVNI Forum as well. A lot of useful information there, plus a lot of qualified applicants trying to connect with a good recruiter. One of the other things you can do is, as Tony said, within a lot of these schools, they have these international clubs, and they have meetings. They're all over. In Olympia footprint, there's Centralia College. They get a lot of students from Mali and West Africa. So certain areas are going to have certain dispositions of languages and backgrounds. So depending on your area, where's 5 Company at? What do you see coming up from your area, sir, as far as MAVNI?
There's a Filipino community hall closer to Yaakov Center.
Yeah.
But we're also doing a consumer. There's Koreans in
Say again, sir?
There's a couple of Koreans in
And the reason I ask is, like I said, being at the battalion, I see where most of the G845 requests are coming from, and I see where they're not coming from as much, and I'm trying to help you all tap into your markets because they're there, and all it takes is connecting with those few guys that have friends, and before you know it, the floodgates have opened. So it's a matter of getting into those international clubs, finding out where these international meetings are being kept within the community, and making sure that you're advertising the program. All right, next slide, please. Qualifications, you must be between the ages of 17 and 34. Obviously, I had one case where the person, they were trying to process but was not going to make it, obviously, to basic training by their 35th birthday. You have to make sure you determine, based on the waiting periods, that this guy's going to be good, because if he's within 6 months of being 35, it's probably not going to work, because they have to be in basic training before their 35th birthday. So just be aware of that. Or the residence, exactly.
Will they do an ETP or?
No ETP for age. No ETP for age. Not even for MAVNI. Asylum seekers, they have to be in a approved status, not pending. So if you have an applicant, and with the whole Syrian crisis status right now going on in the refugee status, there's a lot of people coming over who are going to be temporary protective status or refugee status. They are good to go as long as they are approved and not just pending. So if you have someone that's a refugee, as long as their status is approved, they're good to go. Next slide. These are some of the categories of status. Some of you are more familiar with the F1 that are students. But just so you all know, you could be a performer in a circus and qualify for MAVNI. So don't just focus on the colleges. Believe it or not, MAVNIs can be entertainers. They could be performers. They could be physicians. They could be someone that was a victim of trafficking of persons. As long as you all need to pay attention to these statuses and see where some of these people are within your communities. They're not just students. A lot of people have the perception that MAVNIs are college students or high school students. They meet a lot of different criteria. They can be dependent of a family member who's one of these statuses. They can be working on a farm up there in Spokane or Yakima, they're out there. Now you have to make sure they meet the, trainability 50 QT, but I tell you what, 9 out of 10 times they are going to be 50 plus QT. Next slide, please. Here are some more categories that most of you might not be familiar with. P2, artist or entertainer in the U.S. under a reciprocal exchange program. Coach at the school that's teaching track and field or javelin or something. Never know. As long as he meets the quals, you might want to start talking to some of those people within your communities. Next slide. Informant of terrorism information, S6. That guy could be a MAVNI guy. Just don't throw out those statuses just because you're not familiar with it. If it looks unfamiliar, all you got to do is reference what message.
Or just submit the G845.
What message? What's the current message on MAVNI, please? Somebody, please tell me.
It's on my flag.
I thought all you guys were experts. Sergeant Cabot, what's up?
I'm sorry, we was distracted.
15013, that's the current message on MAVNI. Okay, 15013. Reference that for some of these people that you might be able to find in your community. Next slide, please. All right, Canadians. Who's ever had a Canadian try to, go ahead, talk to me about that experience.
They I've been referring them to up north because it's just such a hassle, but as long as they meet all the it's just like a typical map.
Yeah.
As long as they meet all the qualifications, they.
Yep, exactly. So TC, Canadian physician authorized to engage in direct patient care. It's very important to look at that visa status. It'll help you a lot with determining qualification of your applicants. Next slide. All right. Typical stuff to verify status of your applicant. There's a few documents that I would prefer. So if you're sending up a student, that's an F1 status, the I-20 is the only document you need to send. If you are sending up for someone that's got employment authorization, and they're authorized to work, I need the I-766, that is their employment authorization card. We're no longer asking you guys to send up a G845. With the new system and the new processing, all we simply need is for you to put your RSID at the top of the source document that you are using to verify their status.
Wait,
So-
say that again, you do not need a G845.
Do not need a G845
You just need the
anymore.
source document.
Just the source doc.
Fair enough.
So that makes it very easy for you guys. So if your guy's a student, I need the I-20, and make sure you put your RSID at the top of it. Make sure this information gets back down to your soldiers that are processing the G845 if you're not the ones doing it. Any questions on that?
I just got a
Sure.
I just want to clarify that. So you no longer need the G845.
You no longer need the G845. What happens is that printout is now your document that you would scan into the G845 slot once it comes back down. Next slide.
I have a question about that safe document.
Okay.
Because I asked Craig this yesterday.
Yes.
It comes back approved. Nowhere on that does it say approved.
So since we just started doing it, we don't have an approved stamp yet. I kind of jimmy rigged one. Some of you guys that have gotten one from me, it has a makeshift approved stamp and I write the information
You
in.
can, if you, on that PDF.
Approve it, yeah, it won't let us do it
No,
from
you
that
hit-
website.
If you hit comment on it, you can type in.
But the same website is one of those where it won't let you do anything like that in there, directly from
the
it.
PDF.
But we're working on getting an approved stamp, and you guys will start seeing those soon. Next slide, please. All right, next slide. And I will send this out to you if you all need it. Verification for those applicants without social. Everyone's aware of the process if your MAVNI does not have a social, right?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Caveat, I know you're gonna explain it,
Mm-hmm.
but what you sent out is, like with our social security office.
Yes.
They've taken an example from California,
Yes.
and that is the only thing SSI is saying that they will use now.
Where are you
In
located?
Spokane.
Spokane.
But it happened to me in Salt Lake as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, as soon as this is over, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
via email, but it has, like, they've used their own memo that they modified, it's not the one off the website.
Okay, I can help you out with that. We'll talk offline. Yes, sir?
Are you gonna send us slide?
Yes, I can do that for you. Okay, as far as applicants going to MEPS and taking the test, the minimum requirement is your guy must have tested first. Gotta have a 50 QT, obviously. And they must be able to pass a physical. They need the same kind of PC if they're under the age of 18, just like any other applicant, but they must be physically qualified before you start any kind of processing with these guys, and they must be test qualified as well. Next slide. Education, tier 1, they could be college students. Has anyone ran into any issues with your applicant who has no way of obtaining their education documents? No one from a war-torn area that cannot access their education documents? If you do, there is a process for that. They don't necessarily have to go digging as long as they can prove that from wherever they came from, whether it's somewhere in West Africa where it's like in the middle of a war zone, and they cannot obtain their education documents, there's an exception that can be done for that, as long as they can prove it. Yes?
Medical science.
Same thing. It could be worked out. It's up to the CMO, though, when he, but it could be worked out. I know. All right, I'm being told I gotta speed it up. I know you guys have a lot of questions, but you guys know you can email me directly and I'll help you with that. Next slide, please. Trainability, 50 QT. Exceptions, is out there for certain things, but not the QT must be 50 or higher on the ASVAT. They must meet all the requirements of AR 40-501 as well, Chapter 2. No exceptions authorized, no waivers authorized for moral conduct waivers, but for medical there is. Next slide. All right, next slide. Next slide. OPI, any questions on the OPI? Everybody's familiar with what OPI does and how it works? Okay. Must have a 2 if you're a MAVNI. What do you need to have if you are a 09 Lima? 2 plus, 2 plus. There's a difference. So your MAVNI's 2 plus, they have to score 2 in each area, and 09 Lima's got to be a 2 plus. Next slide. The citizenship process, we've already talked about what documents. So if it's a student, what document are you going to send up to Ops? And if it's somebody that's got work authorization? All right. Next slide. DACA is option 43 and MAVNI 42. Y'all don't really need to concern yourselves with that. That's how we track them when they join. Incentives, can MAVNIs get incentives?
Yeah.
Question? Sorry, what was the question? Yes.
Notify you when we'll be able to pull the MOS.
FSR2?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's never gonna happen.
Well, they said.
I know.
It's not gonna
I heard they're trying to work through some stuff, but right now I don't think it's gonna happen.
I listened to that town hall video, and they said it.
They're working on it, yeah, but I don't know. They're gonna go back and hash it out, but I doubt it. I mean, it could be possible, but there's a reason why they don't have you guys do FSR2 on those guys. And since we're on the topic of that, biggest thing with the MEPs, a lot of the guys that you guys are sending down to join are not coming there with at least 5 jobs that they want to do. There was an issue today, and the MEPs wanted me to make sure you all were aware. If you're sending your guys down to the MEPs, have them at least locked in at least 5 jobs. Because it makes their job really difficult if your MAVNI gets there, just like any other applicant, not just MAVNIs, and they have no idea what they want to do. So I really want to make sure that I drill that home to you guys. Make sure you guys are sitting down and explain to these MAVNI applicants they're not able to get a job that requires a security clearance. That's another big thing. They are really smart people with a lot of, intelligence, and they all have a lot of multiple languages they speak, and they might be engineers in their own field, and, their resumes are crazy for a lot of these applicants. And for some of those guys, being a cook might not be their first choice. But the bottom line is they're joining for a lot of different reasons, and one of those reasons is to become a U.S. citizen for most of them. And it's not like you get to choose what you want to do. As you would tell a regular applicant, sometimes it's just not going to be possible to get what you want to get. All right, next slide. Okay, next slide. All right, you might be surprised on the one coming up next. Next slide. All right, so with that, I just want to throw out a couple more things. As far as the process from here on out, if you are transitioning out, it's very important to have a continuity book of some sort. If you don't have a large center or a center with multiple people who understand the program, because you don't want to leave with the knowledge and not impart that on someone else. It's very important to have continuity within your centers to help those who are going to be behind carrying on. So if you have people transitioning out, and they might not just be as familiar with the program as you are, I need you guys to do some training. I'm always going to be available at the battalion level if you need me to come down and do some training or provide information on how the process works. But I would recommend that you do some training, and my slide deck, I can send it to you if you'd like, and I update it frequently. If you need to, just make sure they're trained up, because it's a little confusing when you're just starting out, but once you've figured out how everything works and how it flows, it's really not that hard. So just make sure you guys are trained, and I don't recommend everyone in your center working MAVNIs, okay? The battalion really likes MAVNI contracts, but at the same time, it's not the priority, okay? Currently, our battalion has written, our mission is about 13% of the contracts written year to date are MAVNI. Now, about 13%. 13, not 30, I wish it was. But 13% is pretty significant. I mean, a lot of people made their admissions, at the end of the year because of MAVNI, to company. So, don't sneeze on it. 13% is not a small number.
It's better than 0.
It is better than 0, and if you take that program away, some people are going to be hurting. Okay? So what I'm saying is, don't let it be your sole focus, but at the same token, make sure, that you're not having everybody focus on the program, because they're going to come back and ask you for, some regular contracts. Any questions?
I do have a question. In
Yes,
one of your
Sergeant.
slides, you said that we're doing SF voluntary statements and every applicant gets an airborne physical.
Reserve applicants don't have to do the airborne physical.
Right. That's what I'm questioning.
Yes. So all MAVNIs must sign the volunteer statement, and they all must volunteer, with the exception of the reserve, they must do the airborne physical. Who knows why that is? So, yep, exactly. Exactly. So one of the things for the volunteer statement, one of the reasons behind that is Who all just heard about, SF guys right now in Syria? Y'all know they just deployed a few guys over there. It's very expensive for the Army to hire contracted linguists, basically. So what they're doing is, that's the reason why they're ramping up this MAVNI pool. They want to have within our ranks qualified people who possess the language skills that they need, so when they get into a combat zone, they get into a hot zone, they don't have to go hire contractors to do the job. We have those guys within our ranks. That's why, like the Colonel pointed out, it's a very important program, and it's very important to national interests. Now we don't have to go hire Arabic speakers from, different parts of the country. We have those speakers within our ranks. So, yes?
Can you have airborne added to the contracts after the person enlists, the MAVNI?
Can you have it added? It's just like any other person that tries to get it after. If it's able to be, then yes.
Okay, 'cause
It's just like any other.
they're giving our guy an issue with either looking for it or touching it. He says he can't make any changes to the contract because the person's MAVNI.
Where are you?
Spokane.
Okay. Can we talk
And
offline
this guy's
too?
He's pestering about airborne. He wants to be airborne. He wants to kick ass.
How far is he away from shipping?
He is about 2 miles.
Okay, I'll talk to Sarntadas. We'll talk offline. Any other questions? All right, in closing, I just wanted one last thing. Like I said before, treat these guys with respect. I understand they're immigrants. They're not maybe your first pick for applicants to join the Army. But First on Pete's like, yeah, they're my first pick. But listen, everybody needs an opportunity, okay? Everybody deserves an opportunity, and when they're coming into your offices, it's because they want to join the Army. They have their own Army stories. I myself wasn't always, I'm not from this country, as most of you already know. I'm Jamaican, so I came through this country, and I'm a naturalized citizen myself. So when I hear people talk about, oh, I want Americans to join the Army, that sometimes that can be hurtful. So you don't know who you work with in your center. Sometimes a lot of those guys are naturalized themselves and may feel some type of way about those types of comments. So like I'm saying, just be aware of what you say and who you say it to when you're in your office. Treat these guys with dignity and respect. They're all qualified applicants trying to have an opportunity just like anybody else. And for the most part, these guys are going to be very committed and will do whatever you ask them to do. So respect the program. It's here for a reason, and I don't think it's going away. Unless you have any questions, that's my class. Thank you so much.